They convinced the committee to start the National Negro Congress, which would become the largest civil rights coalition for its time.
Franklin D. Roosevelt, 32nd U.S. President, in 1933, he signed the National Industrial Recovery Act. Now, I don't know how you felt about him in his presidency, but I was always skeptical about him. I found information that ties him in with communist delegates who were in joint connection with his program. Also, there were communists who advised him to start the National Negro Congress, which at that time was known as the largest civil rights movement coalition. Check this out.
The National Negro Congress was an offshoot of an organization called the Joint Committee on National Recovery, which had links to FDR's National Recovery Act. You had a lot of communist delegates to the Joint Committee. They convinced the committee to start the National Negro Congress, which would become the largest civil rights coalition for its time.
We were a discouraged people. In vain, we sought for something to restore our confidence, our hope, our courage.
What was peculiar about this first mainstream civil rights movement was that it sought to convince black people that they should put all their hopes and dreams and aspirations into the hands of the government.
Anxiously, we waited for some sign of better days. Then came the federal government's work program. One by one, it took us out of the breadline.
James Ford was one of the chief organizers, along with the left-wing union activist A. Philip Randolph.
A. Philip Randolph, who was actually a Marxist, became the president of the National Negro Congress.
Roughly a year or so later came its southern counterpart in Virginia, the Southern Negro Youth Congress. Eventually, it moved from Virginia to Birmingham. The whole point of it was to organize agro laborers throughout the South.
The Southern Negro Youth Congress was formed in 1937 with the support of the Communist Party and began years of activity.
So the question here is, did we give the government too much power? Yes. And why? What was the thing that influenced us in that way of giving the government the kind of power that it has? Check this out. It says, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the National Industrial Recovery Act, NIRA, into law on June 16th, 1933 to combat the Great Depression by regulating industry, establishing labor standards, and funding large-scale public works. Now, I know that sounds like, that's a good thing, right? Like when you say it fast, it's like, oh, they're doing all this stuff for us. First of all, I gave air quotes to Great Depression. There's information circulating that is telling us the Great Depression was actually planned. It was all laid out for it to happen the way it did. It wasn't like, oh man, something went wrong and now we're messed up and we're in this. No, it was planned by powers to be in order for the federal government really to have more power over us. So let me, so look at that. So I'll read it again. So it says, it signed this act into law to combat the Great Depression. So to combat the Great Depression by regulating industry. Yeah, we're going to regulate the industry, we're going to establish the labor laws, and we're going to fund large scale public works. Yeah, we're going to do all this. So let's set this up. I want you to see really what it was really about, right? Because people, we are not given the information to really understand why this whole Great Depression thing happened. Who was at fault? All right, so let me read a little bit more here. So it says the Supreme Court decision. So while the NIRA initially sparked a brief boom in business activity, it was heavily criticized by small businesses for favoring large corporations and eventually caused administrative chaos. It says on May 27, 1935, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously struck down the NIRA in Sketcher Poultry Corporation versus the United States. The court ruled that the act unconstitutionally delegated legislative powers to the executive branch and overreached federal authority regarding interstate commerce. So there's some information on this topic of the Great Depression and FDR I'd like for you to take a look at. I'm going to read some of it with you. So let me pull it up. I'm going to share my screen with you. So right here, I pulled this up, and right here it says Great Myths, Great Depression, McKinnick Center. And then you see a picture of FDR right here. So I'm going to click this link here. And it says Great Myths of the Great Depression. And over here it says Herbert Hoover believed government should play no role in the economy. Government programs help lower unemployment by putting many Americans to work. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal saved America from the failure of free market capitalism. Now, note this, it says down here, these and other myths are dispelled by the facts in this essay by economist Lawrence W. Reed. I'll read some of his work. Right here it says, students today are often given a skewed account of the Great Depression of 1929 to 1941 that condemns free market capitalism as the cause of and promotes government interventions as the solution to the economic hardships of the era. In this essay, based on a popular lecture, McKinnick Center for Public Policy, President Lawrence W. Reed debunks the conventional view and traces the central role that poor government policy played in fostering this legendary catastrophe. I read a little bit more here. Introduction. Many volumes have been written about the Great Depression of 1929 to 1941 and its impact on the lives of millions of Americans. Historians, economists, and politicians have all combed the wreckage, searching for the black box that will reveal the cause of the calamity. Sadly, all too many of them decide to abandon their search, finding it easier, perhaps, to circulate a host of false and harmful conclusions about the events of 7 decades ago. Consequently, many people today continue to accept critiques of free market capitalism that are unjustified and support government policies that are economically destructive. I'll read a little bit more here now. It says here, a modern fairy tale. According to this simplistic perspective, an important pillar of capitalism, the stock market, crashed and dragged America into depression. President Herbert Hoover, an advocate of hands-off or laissez-faire economic policy, refused to use the power of government, and conditions worsened as a result. It was up to Hoover's successor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to ride in on the white horse of government intervention and steer the nation toward recovery. The apparent lesson to be drawn is that capitalism cannot be trusted. Government needs to take an active role in the economy to save us from inevitable decline. You really have to read between the lines on this, folks. So, I mean, it's giving us information that is steering us into the arms of the government. I mean, that's what it's doing. It's putting the blame complete. This is what I see politicians doing also. I see these television commercials where these politicians get on there and they try to downgrade and make their competitor look like they're full of it, like they are incompetent and that they are the cause of all the troubles we have. So this is doing the same thing. It's making it look like Herbert Hoover is this enemy of the state or enemy of the people, and that Franklin D. Roosevelt, he rides on his white horse to save the day. So when I read stuff like that, it always make me suspicious. Like, why are they saying it like that? But nonetheless, there was a culprit to the Great Depression, and there's information here. There's information other places that you can look up. But you really what I want to do here is just get people to question what really happened. Because let's say that information on Franklin D. Roosevelt is showing, and there's more to come. There's more to come in other videos I have that show how Franklin D. Roosevelt, he looks as though he was maybe not a communist. He could have been, but at the very least, he was a communist sympathizer, and he urged people to stand up for communism. So you'll see that later on. But it's things like this that really show Franklin D. Roosevelt was a big, I guess you can say, he was hugely connected to causing something that was going to steer people, its citizens, into the arms of the government. So they're trying to make the government look like this, like your big brother or your parents.
As Americans, you have a right, a legal and constitutional right, to call yourselves communists.